How are you, Andrew, today?
Doing pretty well, Anita. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. We're going to get into the topic of misunderstood, feeling misunderstood. This is something that comes up a lot as we coach clients. It comes up a lot when we go into corporates, even sometimes when people don't realize that there's a misunderstanding happening. It's often the thing that we will get to within this. So there's people that more obviously feel that they're not being understood, that they're feeling misunderstood, and then there's the ones where it's kind of something that evolves through these types of work. So I'm going to ask you some questions, Andrew, on this. I have a bit of an interview if you're keen for that today, if you're open to it.
Totally open to it. Yeah, let's
Very
do it.
good. Okay, all right then. So let's go with what does feeling misunderstood? What does thinking misunderstood even? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a great question to start, isn't it? We could get pretty deep pretty quick. So, a little warning on the label for those that are listening. I think there's at least a couple of different dimensions on this. So, I'd say misunderstood might be a misalignment of perspectives between two people. And it might be a misalignment of perspectives internally within yourself as well. And then I guess we could broaden that out. It could be, a difference in or misalignment of perspectives at an organizational level. Or even, on your internal perspective and the reality that's out there in front of you. So, misunderstood can be a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay. What one do you want to start with?
Let's do relationship. Hey, that's probably the easiest one to focus on, and then maybe we can take it into the internal and interiors, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Cool. Tell me more then about misunderstanding in relationship.
Yeah, well, I think you've got two people involved, and so you've got two human beings who form meaning through their own perception and perspective making system. And no two people ever create the exact same meaning out of a single event in reality. We've all got our own personal filters, which you and I have talked about quite a bit. And so I think it's important to perhaps start at the basics. Everyone constructs their perspectives and the meaning making around those perspectives based on their own filters. So their values, their beliefs, their assumptions, their motivations, their internal drives in the moment. So there's a lot of things that go into the process of meaning making. And out of that, in the relation between two human beings, there's two perspectives that are formed, or many more than that, but, two different perspectives. And when we're communicating and relating with each other, misunderstandings are uncovered or they're not uncovered, and they sort of sleep or a little bit of a dormant factor in relationships until they rear their head at
More
some point down the
commonly.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are faster to break up than they are to realize, because this isn't something that's, commonly taught, right? So it's,
Yeah.
they're more uncovered in things like therapy and coaching rather than potentially between two people. So
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. 100%. And then
Mm.
I guess it's interesting, isn't it? Because there can also be, forget the relationship for a moment, there can be a misunderstanding of self. So perhaps an unawareness of why one is feeling a certain way and what's led to a feeling. And so when you introspect and you look internally as to what's going on, you mightn't be able to find the real driver behind the way that you feel. And, I know for me, often, what can look like many different things is often actually just confusion. So, I know that, when I've felt misunderstood in the past and perhaps prior to some of the intensive coaching work that, has been done here over the past few years, it's really been a lot of it's just been confusion. It's like, okay, I'm misunderstanding something here, either within self or in relation to another. And it can often be disorienting or confusing, and you're not quite sure which way to act. And so then that can manifest as a seeking for more understanding or more clarity. and seeking the understanding or clarity may not even be available to either party in the relationship. And so, yeah, misunderstanding is a big one. It's a huge one. It's a great
Yeah, it's
topic.
huge.
Thanks for
And I
suggesting.
think it's yeah. It's thank you to the viewer that suggested, actually. Hopefully you're watching. And I think it's, one of those really key ones. That's the important thing to go, yeah, we'll start with relationships, but really it comes back to relationship with self, because the more that we can fully understand, or as much as we can understand ourselves more, then relationships become much easier. And it gets to the
Mm.
point where it doesn't actually matter whether they understand us or not. Once we can understand ourselves, we don't hold an expectation that anyone really needs to. We just see that if they're struggling with something, then it's their own relationship with self that's probably inhibiting them from being able to see past their own pains and hurts. So it's a really important topic. And ultimately it's like that thing where you talk about, it's the confusion part can often lead to us, because we're confused, because we may not have had access to this kind of work, or to speak to a professional. Yeah, that confusion can manifest in ways that is helpful or self-protective at the time, but not necessarily, the best of us in seeking to understand ourselves first. We can often go out there and try and hope that someone's going to understand us, but we don't really know what's going on. So it can be a bit of a mess
Yeah.
until
Well, I
we
think
start.
also it'd be worth mentioning just at this point that, for the most part, most people, and I know this is a grand generalization, but for the most part, we mind read each other. So we think we know another's interior
Mm,
or inner reality, and the reality of it is we don't.
mm,
And it's interesting, as human beings, we seem to be biologically wired for connection, and so we do grasp for understanding of ourselves and understanding of another. And in some respects, that's unachievable.
Well,
And
I
so
think
there's
that's the problem. It's as if the biology, is got anything to do, in theory, with the meaning making mind. So we're wired biologically, yeah, physically, whatever. And if we just left it at that, then we'd be okay. But it's the mind and the talking to self, and then the arguing and all the problems that we have, where we're not living by the biology. In theory, yeah, we're wired biologically, so let's just be quiet and be together, and there's no problems. It's when all of
yeah,
that stuff, as you talked about, those the beliefs, the values, all of the childhood experiences that have helped us to view the perspectives that we do here and now, when they're not understood, then that's when we are in a world of trouble and meaning making, that we don't really even know
yeah.
what is being
So let me
driven by.
talk a little bit more into the misunderstanding and connection aspect, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Before
sure,
we
of
go there.
course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, most human beings, have a desire to connect. And, there's three levels of connection in human relating. And, one is in service of a fulfillment of needs. And so this is where, I have a need as a self, and, I put that onto you in the hope that, you help me meet my need and I feel fulfilled. That's one level of connection, and one level where misunderstanding can arise and relationship breaks down. And I would say that this is, for 90% of people, this is the level that we're talking about. In fact, in therapy and relationship counseling and, a lot of the modalities that we see now, it's the narratives all around meeting each other's needs.
A lot of
And so
coaching,
that,
a lot of relationship
and a
coaching as
lot
well.
of coaching.
It's
Yeah,
on
yeah,
math,
absolutely.
it's all about that, a stage, right? A certain stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's about a stage. And then at some point, we transcend beyond needing another to meet our needs, and we move into this space of desire and growth. And so it's just a desiring of a feeling of being connected and able to have a shared experience for mutual growth with another. And so that's a whole different set of purpose for connecting. And just like connecting at the level of needs, there can equally be as much misunderstanding with that. But generally, people that have developed themselves to be connected for growth are usually very self-sufficient and independent people already, and they're coming into relationships, for the shared experience. It's kind of like, I can do so much on this earth as a self, and then with another we can go further. And so that's kind of the mentality of, let's say a person who's connecting for growth and desire. And then there's a third level of connection, which is really just the ability to be present with another, with no conditions, with no preconceived notions, with no needs, just to be able to be in the presence of another. And it's almost like a field of reflection. You're seeing in the other what might be missing in you, and vice versa. And it's a beautiful space. It's a beautiful space to just be seen by another for the authentic human being you are, without any mind reading, without any preconceived notions, without any assumptions, without any filters. That's a beautiful space. And there's very few people and relations that, really ever get there. And so for the large part, many people do walk around the planet feeling misunderstood in some way, shape or form in the search for, one of these three forms of connection.
Yeah. And it's really key, I think, to know within that, it's that thing of ultimately we don't need to be seen by that other person, and we don't really care about that at those kind of stages of being more present. It's like you can just look in a mirror or look at yourself and there's that reflecting back at you. And I think that's the really important, part to this. It's like the moment that there's an understanding fully of self, it's like, again, like I said earlier, but it's even more like people, the minute we can feel understood, people will understand us. We no longer feel misunderstood because we're so clear of who we are and what we're doing here and all the rest of it, that we're articulating that. We're walking about, in a world that we're just, that's just radiating from us. And so we're not seeing anyone in theory misunderstanding us. We might see some things going on for people and we can see that that's their stuff, but the misunderstanding part isn't there because we are now in full understanding of self. And just again being very aware that this is very high level stuff. Going back to that, the whole biology part and all the rest of it, it's that part of we are conditioned to believe that we need the other to make us feel a certain way about ourselves. And that is definitely where that misunderstanding piece comes in, because often, as we see the divorce rates and the breakup rates and the state of relationships and all the rest of it these days, it comes down to misunderstanding, not feeling seen, not feeling heard in a relationship, or, whatever language we use, it all points to not being fully understood. And so the more that we can do the work on ourselves to get to what is it really that I'm not feeling seen, heard, understood around, what's really happening for me. Because sometimes for people, even if people are seeing them really clearly, they will still struggle they'll still be focusing on where they're not being seen and heard, even when there's people that are doing it, because there's something within them that's still being driven, usually by their experiences of their past, maybe when they weren't heard as children or seen because their parents were busy and had things going on or were absent and all the rest of it. So it's like the true understanding of self has got to be in that exploration for us of digging down into, what was.
So we just had a little interruption. So, we're kicking back into our live stream now.
The question, I guess, that comes up now is, as you see people come into coaching with some story around potentially not feeling understood, maybe there's a particular relationship that it's prominent in, maybe it's a work situation, something going on at home. How would you work with your clients on that? How do you work with clients on this subject, Andrew?
Yeah, actually, if it's okay, I might just share a personal experience, if that's okay. Yeah, because I think, what you were saying just before we had a little circuit breaker there, you can feel misunderstood because you may not realize that you're coming from a wound. And so, yeah, I totally buy that. And, often that's a lot of what I see in the coaching too. And that's what I've seen in myself for many years of life, because obviously this coaching thing for me has only been a relatively recent phenomenon the last few years. And then you can also get to a point where, it's actually a triumph to be misunderstood. And I don't think this is talked about too much, so I just want to spend a minute or two on this if it's okay. And I felt misunderstood for a long part of my life. in one way, shape, or form, because I always felt a little bit different. And at some points in life, that was a bit of a struggle. There was the self-judgment, perhaps consciousness of the self-image. I developed a big personality to compensate for other, wounds that were on the inside. And, I think over the journey, I've learnt to accept, all the parts of myself, including the quirks and the idiosyncrasies that are here, and just know that, other people may not be able to read what's going on the inside for me, and may not be able to or want to see, the full beauty that I've got to offer. And so, it's been very much a process, particularly in the last few years, of just actually accepting, the parts of myself that other people may reject. And, I've become more and more okay with that now. And so what I find sometimes, in relation, there are disconnects. There always are in relationships, but it's not internalized the same way. For me now, it's more, there's a confusion if there's a disconnect in relationships sometimes, and a wondering of what's happening in the shared space. But it's not so much like I feel like, I'm squarely coming from a wound or squarely needing to assert my own, good qualities. It's becoming less and less about that now. And so it can be coming from a wound, but it can also be coming from a sense of a person who's really actually just stepped into their own authority and individuation. It can be a sign of health being misunderstood.
Well, it's exactly how you frame it, right? Because if anyone knows about the Enneagram, the type 4 is the individualist. And there's this kind of thing with the individualists, type 4s, that there's kind of a struggle sometimes because they want to be different and they want to be misunderstood, but then they reject it as well. So if anyone feels this, it may be worth going a look and having a look at that particular typology, because it's like, and the minute that we can just step into the power of ourselves and going, actually, this is a bit of an identity for me to be different, to be misunderstood. Maybe I don't want to be understood. Maybe if I'm understood, I'm just going to be a normal human being like everyone else. And how boring might that be? Yeah. So there's some really big, like the minute we can start to reframe the way that, we have become, we don't want to change it because it's part of who we are. In theory, it's like, well, yeah, embrace it. And the minute we can do that and make that, reframe, make that change, then we're free. And I think what often comes with that freedom is a massive part of this. When I work with many 4s on this stuff, is part of it as well, is going, are you allowing people to see you? And a lot of 4s will say to me, that when they really get down to it, they kind of go, yeah, I'm really vulnerable and I'm all of this. But actually they'll say, actually, no, I'm not. Because there is a part of me that wants to either not be judged or rejected for it, and wants to kind of hold on to this difference as well. So if I give too much away, then it will maybe make me normal, and I don't want to be normal. Yeah. So I think once we can start really getting into that part of it, maybe we do want to show some vulnerability. Maybe we do want to be a bit more truthful actually in who we are. Or maybe we ourselves don't even know that, and we need to go and do the work on ourselves to fully then understand ourselves before we can really start to share authentically the vulnerability that maybe we thought we were sharing before, but maybe it was coming out in extreme emotion that wasn't maybe the full potential of us because we weren't really truly getting ourselves. There was still something in there going, I don't want to show this part of me because it got rejected when I was a child, and I don't want to risk that rejection again. So it's a really complex subject, this one.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I think for those that are in relationship and maybe struggling with the misunderstanding, like, I really resonate with what you just shared there. It's to really, obviously first, as you said, the work is on the self to really try and understand yourself at the depths. And it's very helpful to have someone to do that with too, because, you're not aware of what you're not aware of. And so that's just very difficult. And so this work, if you have a partner that's willing to actually, sit with you and see you as you are and reflect that back to you without any judgment, without any mind reads, without any suggestions on your faults and failings, then, this work's the most beautiful, I think, that's available on the planet right now. And it's not easy. It's so hard in a certain sense. but it's so rewarding. And I feel like in the relationship space, we're not trained on how to be together. We're trained on how to demand things from each other and, push ourselves on each other and, assert our needs and all this sort of stuff and set boundaries and da 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 da. But we're not really trained on, how to be together. It doesn't happen in school, at least not that I remember. And certainly Ollie hasn't been trained on that either. And so I think that's the biggest thing. If you're in a relationship, you've got to have two people that are willing to actually see each other somewhat nakedly and with a radical acceptance.
And again, if that's something that's difficult, because it is difficult, and probably you're not sitting with your partner who's a professional, go and sit with someone. Go and get some professional help. I mean, as much as I see couples that are fairly healthy and stuff, nothing beats actually sitting with a professional to be able to help that. Because when there is usually one party that feels misunderstood, the other one is usually probably at a similar level of some sort of pain, whether it's whatever it may be for them. And it's hard for people, when we're in struggles in relationships, we're not trained to see beyond our own needs. When we're in the shit and we're arguing, to be able to sit there when we're feeling like we're not being heard and they're feeling like they're not being heard and we're not understanding or listening, whatever extremity it is for each of that person, it's very hard to play an objective role unless you've been trained in this. So do as much as you can, obviously, with whoever you're with. That's but true. There's nothing really that would beat sitting with someone who's objective to it.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting too, isn't it? Because misunderstanding, I mean, as you said, the first and most important place to work on misunderstanding is with yourself, for sure. That's where to start. Why do I do what I do? Who am I? What am I all about? And once you've got that, I mean, I don't think it's ever done, that work, to a certain extent, unless you're completely enlightened. But once that's done to a certain degree, it's just wonderful to have another person who you can share that experience with. And, to me, that's part of the joy of being a human being. We'll never know each other to the full depths. But that's part of, the joy of human being and our ability to relate with each other.
Probably we'll never really fully know ourselves for most of us, right?
Yeah.
Something apparently becomes quite clear when it's kind of right at the end of that.
So I think, one thing also to say, I think it was last week or that it was a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about gaslighting. And just to link this back to gaslighting, probably what, I didn't share to the full measure was, gaslighting is really where we're trying to enforce a reality on another person. And so, we're not really talking about that here. But I guess it's fair to say that, if you're in relationship with someone and they've got a very strong opinion about your interior world and the exterior truth, then it means that they're not actually sitting in presence with you. They're not actually being with you. They're being with their image of you. And in let's say the technical terms, they're projecting their image of you onto you. And so, just to round it back to the gaslighting, it's so important that we're sort of not talking over each other and talking at cross purposes with another. To be with another in relationship is to just genuinely witness the whole being, all parts, and to be curious and to be open-minded and, perhaps not to live in past frames of each other, to really look at things fresh in each moment. And I think you said that maybe last week in one of our calls, just to really be able to be fresh with each other in each and every moment.
And I think that whole gaslighting thing does tie in really well, because often when people do feel misunderstood, they will reach for probably words more like gaslighting, because it's kind of that point of not really knowing what's going on, don't really know ourselves. Now someone's telling me, but I don't trust myself enough. So now that's, this is where all of this kind of stuff can tie in. So if there's some advice that you could give to anyone who is feeling misunderstood, and it's probably more the people that have suffered a life of misunderstanding rather than, I know most people at some point can feel like someone's misunderstanding them, but really those that maybe suffer it more deeply. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you might offer to them, Andrew?
Yeah, I think, like you offered and, I seconded earlier on, it's first do the work on yourself. So, if you're feeling misunderstood, just make sure you understand yourself first. And, understand whether you're coming from a wound in the past or understand whether you're coming from something that's really uniquely you and it's something that you're actually about. And it's something that, speaks to your essence. And if it is something that is uniquely you and it's your essence and that's who you want to be, then really learn to back yourself in the face of misunderstanding. I know even recently for me, there's differences of opinion with, certain topics. I won't mention them. And it's not to do with you, but just certain topics in my life where, I've had to question myself, how do I know this is true for me? And so I've got my own method of doing it. And, I went through that process and, I came to the conclusion that this is true for me. And it doesn't really matter whether it's right or wrong. And it doesn't
There
really
is
matter
no
what
right
other
or
people
wrong.
think. There is no right or wrong. To a certain extent, there's some things that are better than others, though, right?
Better in your perspective, right? But it's not every person in the world is going to agree with you on that, right? So it's
yeah.
perspectives. Yeah.
So I think, develop your own strong sense of who you are and, really develop a positive relationship with your own idiosyncrasies and uniqueness. And because this is the value you can give to the world, there'll be no one else that can do what you do or be who you are. You're the only person that will ever be you on the planet. The universe doesn't create two of anything. And so that was a beautiful piece of advice I received from Paul Chek many years ago. And it really is true when you're going through misunderstanding and relational difficulties. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, nice, cool. I think I would add to that is to really ask yourself, am I ready to be understood? And that's, I think, quite a big one. And if you're not, we can sort of tell ourselves that we are, but we're not allowing it. So it's that thing of, if you're really not, and there's an identity piece, then that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay with that uniqueness that you talk about. Be that, and be okay that maybe you're not going to be understood. And sometimes within that kind of acceptance within self, we will more naturally begin to allow that understanding. We've kind of let go of that, and I think things become more easy and flow more. So, but yeah, if there is an identity with being misunderstood at some level, it's like, well, that's beautiful. It's part of who you've become, and hold on to that, and love that about yourself. So,
yeah.
okay.
I'll share with you a little funny closing if you've got a minute. I was at Bunnings on the weekend, and at Bunnings here in Australia, they do a little sausage sizzle, and the proceeds go to charity, and da 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 da. And one of the things for me is I've always been quite an outgoing person, and that started really really early because I was an only child, and so in some respects I was forced to be up and about and extroverted and perhaps reaching for the social aspect of life. And I said to the lady that was serving the sausages at this fundraiser, I said, has anyone ever told you that you look like Katy Perry? And she did. She just looked like a spitting image of Katy Perry. And she looked at me and she just broke into this big smile and laughter. And she said, I can't wait to tell my flatmate that I got called Katy Perry today. And we both just had a bit of a laugh. And I kind of feel like, that's the essence of being a human being. And, I feel like some of the things that I've been misunderstood for in the past in my life that came from, the really early childhood that we talk about all the time, they're also just beautiful gifts. If people know how to take them the right way, they're beautiful gifts. Sometimes they can be taken in the way that wasn't intended, and that's okay too. And you've got to be able to, be with yourself in that, and also be with the other person in that too. And so I just thought I'd share that little story.
Works both ways, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
All right then. Thanks everyone. Thanks Andrew. Thanks everyone for joining.
Anita.
Any questions,
Good
any
idea.
suggestions of any future topics, then please let us know and we shall see you back next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.